Welcome to the AskARoofer Podcast, where all your roofing questions find their answers. Your hosts, Megan Ellsworth and Lauren White, peel back the layers of the roofing world to reveal the knowledge, tips, and FAQs you've been curious about. From shingles to skylights, metal to asphalt, we're here to demystify the system above your head. So get ready to ask, learn, and explore the fascinating world of roofing, one question at a time, on the AskARoofer Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the AskARoofer Podcast. I'm Lauren White, and I am joined today by Mitch with Good Faith Energy, and we are going to be talking about roofing and solar and all of the things that go into it. And I am very excited to learn more because I'm just fascinated by solar and all of its capabilities. So, Mitch, we're really happy to have you here, and I'm just going to have you start with introducing yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name's Mitch Sargent. I work at Good Faith Energy. We're based in Dallas, Texas. We are a energy company. So we're a solar installer. We're an EPC. EPC stands for equipment procurement and construction. So we handle everything when it comes to the solar install. We don't outsource anything. We have our own installation crew, et cetera, which we'll talk about a little bit later, how that distinction sets us apart. In addition, we've got GFE, Good Faith Energy Roofing, as a division of our company, as well as an EV charging company. We work all over the state of Texas, and we're one of the highest rated companies in the state. I've been in solar personally since 2020. I got my start in the industry knocking on doors in Southern California, selling residential solar. And door knocking with 100% commission. I had my first child at the time. That was definitely a way to light the fire under your butt and learn as much as you can about solar and get good really fast. Before that, I was in the wine business, actually, so from 2007 to 2020. I was am an advanced sommelier, and I was a supplier, which in the renewable space, the equivalence to that would be a manufacturer rep. So I was selling wine to a lot of different types of people, whether it's restaurants or large groups or grocery store chains, et cetera, running programs and special deals. And education was a big factor of that. But I really have enjoyed my switch into this industry. It's so much more rewarding and just overall beneficial to everyone. So that's kind of my bit of background there.
Yeah. Wow. Very diverse. That's awesome. Yeah. So then how did you choose to go from wine to commercial solar?
Yeah. So I was really drawn to commercial solar when I first started hearing about the NEM law changes in California. So at the time I was living in Southern California, knocking doors, selling residential solar, and the NEM changes started to become, more than just rumors, but they started proposing bills, and there was a lot of lobbying from the utilities to get rid of net metering. So that's a NEM law, is net metering law. And that is basically the credits that you receive for your solar production. So anything that's not immediately consumed on site goes back to the grid, and it can make a big impact, especially at the commercial scale, with how much credit you get or not get from the utility for that extra generation. So California was about to change that, and I saw the writing on the wall that there was going to be a big devaluation coming for residential solar. So and they hadn't proposed those changes in the commercial world. So I wanted to jump over to CNI to prevent me and help isolate me from that potential shakeup. Also, I really liked the idea that I could make a bigger impact on the planet, deploying larger arrays and offsetting more emissions. The politics around solar is so funny because people are so against it, and I don't get why, because what's the harm in green energy? Yeah. The worst case scenario with green energy is you have cheaper power and cleaner air. So I just don't fully get that. But I really like the increased complexity of the commercial proposal process. The idea of adding batteries and exploring rate changes, seeing what kind of demand charge reductions you can achieve. It's all really fascinating to me, and I kind of nerd out on the optimization of things like that, which you can. There's a lot of levers to pull in the commercial realm, especially when you're factoring in things like batteries and EV charging. Um, it's really exciting, and it's really fun for me to bring a potential client on that journey through the proposal process, because I think there's a lot more to it than just slapping some panels on a roof, and a lot more to achieve to really work with kind of the client's goals. So that's what drew me to commercial solar.
No, that's awesome. It's always fun to hear how people get into roofing and,
Yeah.
specifically solar. So, thank you for sharing that. And, for people listening, hopefully they're considering solar for their roof.
Mhm.
Um, what are some of the common commercial roofing or structural issues you see when clients are considering adding solar that might be prohibitive to them adding
Oh,
that?
yeah, and this is such an important question. The first thing that I do whenever I'm gonna hop on a call, even if it's just a brief introductory call, is pull up the site address. Let's look at that rooftop, and I can't tell you how many times that I see just these rooftops that have 40 years old, 50 years old, tons of patches, leaking. It's like it's so important to not ignore your roof.
Yeah.
And there can be serious savings with the new roofing materials that are out there, like high albedo roofs with reflective surfaces. We can actually encompass that into our solar design with bifacial panels. So, a bifacial panel has solar on both sides, basically the front. 90% or so of your production comes from the front of the panel, which is facing the sun. But because the panels are sort of tilted up on the racking system, and the racking is what holds the solar module to the roof, that reflection from the high albedo roof can bounce off the roof and go to the underside of the panel and increase your production. So, very fun to do that, because a lot of people don't think that way about it. But also, if you've got an old roof, it can be really difficult to fix issues down the line. If you've got a solar array on there, it can be expensive to remove panels and the racking to access where you might have a problem on the roof. So I always recommend, always recommend a roof inspection before you get solar installed. You're making a big investment. It's better to do it right. Otherwise, you end up paying more in the long run.
Yeah.
Um, and if you get a new roof installed, we, Good Faith Energy, will work with your roofing company. Or maybe you even want to use Good Faith Energy Roofing. We have a division of our company that specializes in roofing. And let's say you have that new roof and you want to go solar, we'll work with your roofing company to not void that new warranty. That's a big question when owners are exploring solar is, oh no, I don't want a leaky roof. I don't want um, to void my roof warranty. I just made this big investment in the new roof, and what can you do? Well, there's products out there that are designed to keep your roof intact. And specific to commercial roofing, we use, where we can, we like to use ballasted roof systems. So ballasted roof systems are racking systems that are specifically designed not to penetrate through the roof membrane,
Hmm.
which is pretty cool. So the racking, which holds the modules, is just held onto the roof by the weight of the system. We actually throw cinder blocks into the racking trays, and the weight of the system will hold it down to the roof. So that's pretty cool. And the weight of that system usually doesn't exceed 5 pounds per square foot. So a lot of people,
Oh,
when I hop on calls and they're talking about, well, what about all that weight? And my simple question to them is, are you comfortable standing on your roof? If that answer is yes, we can install solar. It's only 5 pounds per square foot.
yeah.
The panel itself is heavy, but the um, the racking disperses that weight across a greater surface area. So super easy. So we'll take care of the warranty, make sure it's intact, and the structural issue, usually never a concern, but we will also check ourselves before we do any installation. Site survey is part of our process,
Mm.
which we'll get into later, I think, in this call.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
That's actually the next question, is kind of going through the process of a commercial solar project from kind of that assessment to, routine maintenance, as well. So we can just dive right in.
Yeah, this is a great question. So I do things a little bit differently than some other EPCs. Partly because Texas, partly because we do a pretty fair amount of volume. So I've got to weed out tire kickers, window shoppers like that. So I like to do a quick initial assessment with ballpark numbers. So takes me about an hour to throw a basic proposal together, especially if I've got the utility bill information or interval data that I can just copy and paste into our proposal generating tool and get some numbers back really quick for the client. And if that looks good, then we schedule what's called a site survey. And that's really when we get serious. So the initial bid is good, and I usually am 10% accurate. Not 10% accurate, 90% accurate.
There you go. Yeah.
There can be some unforeseen things which we'll discover during the site survey, and so we'll adjust our bid. And after the site survey, where we come in and inspect the electrical, and for the inspection of the electrical, we'll have to make sure everything is up to code because there's a lot of inspections through the process and permitting process as well. So we have to make sure that we're good on everything. So we'll go and inspect. And if there's anything that we have to do to bring the property up to code, we'll make those recommendations. And we also inspect the roof, make sure that the structural is there and the roof is in good condition. Otherwise, we'll recommend, if it hasn't already been done, a roof inspection from a third party. So that's kind of the initial process. And then once the site survey is complete, we'll refine our initial bid and represent. I find that the quick ballpark, I already started to say that the ballparking, it'll weed out those unserious buyers. But the final bid, if they like that, we'll move to contract and take a deposit, and then we go on to permitting. This process can take a bit of time. The whole process, if we're moving quickly and getting through it, like everyone hopes, maybe 3 months to 6 months at the long end. Some places in Texas are quicker. I've seen permits come back within a couple weeks. In California, when I was working that market, it could be a year. Like there, some
Wow.
places in the country are just much longer. But then at the same time, like I've had one permit that came back same day in California. It's just kind of a gamble. So, working with an EPC that is familiar with the AHJs and the utility companies, that can help streamline the process. So companies that are busy are good. And once we get the system installed, the next process is just kind of waiting for the inspections. That's the AHJ, which could be the city. Then the utility company has to do their final inspection and grant you PTO, and PTO is permission to operate. Let's see, and for so that's the process in a nutshell for the assessment to turning it on. And then maintenance is a separate thing. We offer O&M services where we'll come out and do a yearly check on the system, which is a pretty minimal cost. We'll make sure there's no hot spots developing in any of the mods, from hail damage or whatnot. So generally, that's a pretty good thing to do on a yearly basis. Other than that, there's not much. And part of what sets our company apart is we only use the top sorts of equipment. So we're never involved in the race to the bottom. There's a lot of solar companies that'll engage in that sort of behavior where they want to win bids by being the cheapest. And I've seen a lot. I've been on both sides of this industry in my short time in the industry. I've worked both on the manufacturer side and the EPC side, and I've seen that race to the bottom really end badly, where you end up getting stuck as the EPC, or you're forced to cut corners, and we just don't do that. So we're going to spec with the best equipment, the most reliable equipment, the longest warranties possible. We don't want it to be a headache for you, and that's part of why our company has been so successful. Our clients are happy. One of my first jobs in the industry, one of the um, components that we had to use was, and I won't name names for the company, but one of the components, one of the inverters was so unreliable. It was off like every month, and like,
Oh,
great,
wow.
it was more affordable, but was it worth it? And then if you're slapping a loan product to it, or some sort of finance product, you're still on the hook for that system if it's not producing. So if you've got an inverter offline, or your modules aren't working, or if some sort of issues occurring, you can be out a lot and be upside down in what was supposed to be, a savings tool for you. So that was just a quick spiel about reliable and good installations. But in terms of maintenance, yeah, yearly check, and then just make sure your panels are clean.
Yeah.
A good rain here and there usually does the trick. Like I've lived in Texas now since 2020, and I installed solar on my house right away when I moved here, and I haven't done one thing to my system, and it is still overproducing what my production report was forecasting. So,
Wow.
um, yeah, pretty low maintenance as long as you've got the right materials.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and so talk to me about different climate conditions, right? Like you've worked in California, now you're in Texas, like I'm in Oregon. How do people assess kind of like the benefits and potential risks of investing in solar given the conditions that they live in? Like I
Yeah.
get more snow and maybe not as much sunshine as you might get. So,
Yeah, and this is a really great question. And we'll dive into this a little bit more, but on the surface level here, one of the fundamental parts of good faith energy is honesty, um, and I'll bring this back to the climate conditions here, but
yeah.
the big part about work to me, and too often I see these wild over promises, and this can be related to you know where you're located, or um, the experience of the installer or EPC. Wild over promises, including like PV designs that are just not possible, like EPCs that are ignoring shading or roof obstructions. Um, at the end of the day, I'm an energy consultant, not a salesperson. Um, and I'm going to run through a very detailed analysis, walk you through the realities of solar at that specific site. So I take into account, where you're located. And again, I've been a developer and developed solar projects all across the United States, and especially in the continental U.S., largely is the same process. You have to take into account snow loads in cold climates, and if you're adding batteries, you have to make sure that they have the proper thermal management. Can they keep themselves cool in hot climates? Can they keep themselves warm in cold climates? How much losses is due to that? Do you have software that can make those adjustments? Because if you're not accounting for temperature and climate and things like that, because you cheaped out on the proposal software, you're not doing any good for your client. So, um, I've seen some big name EPCs just draw giant rectangles over the roof and ignore HVACs, and just all these mistakes that can happen because people are going quick and just trying to win bids. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's just not honest behavior. And I think they give EPCs a little bit of a bad name. And that's why I think it's so important to do a little research on the company you're getting a bid from. Check the reviews. Good faith energy is the highest rated independently owned EPC in Texas.
Well,
So the biggest thing that you can do as a business owner to de-risk solar and the where you're located and the different climate conditions is just go with a reputable company. There's so many variables out there. You're not going to be the expert. So just make sure that you're finding someone that is going to do right by you, and you've got to trust them.
so, the solar panels are one part of the system, and there's also battery storage and, EV charging. So can you talk to us
Yeah.
about, first off, what those both mean and what they are, and
Yeah.
then how, adding those can kind of change the trajectory of your solar energy usage and savings?
Yeah. This is out of all the questions that we have today, this is probably the best question. This is it's new to the industry. Solar's been around a while. People more or less know kind of the gist of how solar works, at least in the fundamental aspect of it. But battery storage and EV charging are two critical components that people just overlook a lot. And, that could be because of budget, and rightly so. These things are expensive, but they can be huge vehicles to increase ROIs, increase and drive revenue even, and I'll get into that a little bit. But when we talk about battery storage, we're talking about batteries, and EV charging can come in two different flavors. You've got level 2 charging, which is slower speeds where you're gonna stay 4 hours or more parked in a location. Generally, level 2 chargers aren't that great for driving revenue. It's more of an amenity at a property, meaning you're going to give your employees some free charging, as a perk for work, or maybe you're a hotel and you want to allow your guests to just plug in overnight while their car sits there. Um, and then batteries, they're so much more than just backup power. They can drive immense savings. I mean, like in California, for instance, a battery has an ROI that's 2 times as fast as solar. Like, that's how
Wow.
much batteries make a difference in the economics of a solar system. And it varies greatly depending on where you are in the country.
Mhm.
Here in Texas, backup is probably the key feature that people look for. But a battery can also provide demand charge savings. So, what is a demand charge? So, commercial clients get charged differently than residential. If you're paying your residential bill, you're paying, a rate multiplied by how many kilowatt hours you consumed in that month. Pretty basic. And then there's probably some fees as well. As a commercial client, you get charged for that as well. Then you have another part of your bill that's specifically for demand charges, and that's how much energy did you use in an instance. And the analogy that I always use is, say you have a swimming pool in your backyard. You're going to fill that swimming pool. You're going to pay the water for the water regardless. But you have two options. You can fill it slowly with your garden hose, or you can fill it super quick with a fire hose. So you've got the water charge that's going to be the same regardless. But if you use that fire hose and fill your pool quickly, you're going to get a big penalty attached to that. A battery can help reduce that. So when you're using power as a building, you can set your batteries up to every time your EV charger kicks on, or every time your HVAC system kicks on. Maybe you're a medical building and you have a MRI machine, or you're a car wash and you're running cars through a car wash. There's all sorts of things that give you a spiky load, as we call it in the industry, where these machineries will kind of fluctuate between on and off. And when they're on, they're using an immense amount of power. And when they're off, it's very little. So to shelter yourself from the demand charges, which can be astronomical in certain places, you can set the battery to discharge when those pieces of equipment are on. So you're
Hmm.
basically buffering the bid and the grid from the grid, and there's a lot of savings to be had there. Other functions are like demand response programs, which are available with certain participating utilities. Those can be really lucrative. And what those are, basically when a utility has a forecasted event, or maybe there's a weather related event like a heat wave or something. You might even get a cell text on your cell phone from the utility company that says, hey, like, we're going to have a heat wave next Wednesday. Would you mind bumping your thermostat up from, 72 to, 85? Like, just be uncomfortable for the day and don't use power. That's what they want. So, um, if you enroll your battery asset during those moments, they'll discharge your battery. They'll basically ping your battery and say, hey, will you discharge during this heat wave we're having, or whatever it may be, whatever the event is. And we're going to pay you a lot of money per kilowatt hour. So you can enroll your backup asset as a revenue generating asset as well. In fact, that model can be so lucrative. There's certain utilities in the deregulated sections of Texas that actually give you a free battery uh,
Wow.
during this. And I'm talking myself out of battery sales here, but the program exists, and it's because it's lucrative. So that's very, very cool. Um, and that helps when the grid is stressed. It uses that power, and they don't have to spin up their own peaker plants, which is incredibly expensive and um,
Mhm.
not great for the environment. So you're avoiding that. So it's a win all around, to be honest.
Yeah.
Um, there's other benefits such as rate switches in certain markets. So rate switches are like California has these all over. If you add a battery, you can swap your rate plan. You just have to be careful with some of those rate switches because they'll invert your demand charges with your kilowatt hour charge. And so the only way to not get a super penalty to that is add solar. So really,
Mm.
solar and batteries can be very symbiotic and synergistic. And another thing with adding a battery is you can take your excess generation and put it into your battery. So we'll map out, after we design a solar system, and the goal is always as much power as you can possibly fit on the roof and get up to 100%, give or take. We can go to a larger than 100% offset. Offset is the industry term for how much power is coming from the solar versus how much you're buying from the utility company. So if our goal is 100% offset, you're going to have certain months, where you're overproducing, especially in the summer where your building is using less than what your solar might be producing. Um, and it depends on the building and the load type and things like that. There's a lot of variables, but if you are overproducing in certain months, you don't want that generation just to go to waste if you don't have a good NEM rate that we started this conversation off with. So if your net metering rate is $0 per kilowatt hour exported, then you don't really want to just give the utility free power. Let's put it in your battery, and then you can use it later. That's called arbitrage. So it's your power, and you can use it how you want.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. And then everyone thinks of backup and batteries kind of in the same breath, and that is very much true. That's probably definitely here in Texas. That's the biggest benefit of a battery system because our grid still needs a lot of work. But before you talk about backup, I like to ask three questions to the owner of the building: is how often does the power go out? How long is the power out for? And how much
Mm.
money did you lose during those outages? You don't know those answers. Maybe a backup battery isn't right for you. But
Yeah.
so it's not for everyone. It is an added expense, but for the right industries, it can be critical, and they're advantageous over the alternative, which is generators, which generators need maintenance, and they're
Right.
noisy and dirty, and they have a slower time to turn on. Batteries operate, in a grid outage, they can turn on in milliseconds, whereas,
Mm.
10 seconds is the threshold for generators. So,
Yeah.
um, a lot there to digest. And with, Texas adding AI and data centers all around, like, it's it's faster than upgrading its grid. So they're adding all these data centers and AI centers faster than they're upgrading the grid, which is going to play a big role in more frequent and longer outages.
Yeah.
So if you've got an industry like, I had a client just yesterday that owns a bunch of medical facilities, and they have refrigeration for their blood samples, and they need to keep those cool. So
Right.
they don't want generators because they've used those in the past and they're unreliable, and they want backup batteries because they're quicker, more reliable, and cleaner. And with the state of the grid, like, it was critical to their business.
For sure.
So that's batteries. And now EV charging, that's a whole other aspect to this game, which is really, really cool. I know a lot about EVs. I'm a big EV proponent. I think I've owned 5 or 6 personally over the years, and um, have had just a great time exploring that. And EVs are here to stay, even though the incentive is gone. But they are statistically, they're still growing. And if you look at who's bought EVs, um, again, statistically, they don't go back. Like, the EV
Yeah.
experience and is it's just infinitely better. I mean, I haven't gone to a gas station in years and years, and I'm not complaining about that. Like, it's they're weird, they're smelly, they're
Yeah.
sketchy. I don't know. Like, I like having a full charge when I go out to my car in the morning. And
Yeah.
for a while there, the charging network was a little sketchy, just like a few years ago, 2020, I did a road trip from Texas to the East Coast, and a bunch of the charging sites were offline, or there was long lines. Like, there was all this
Mm.
stuff. And in just a few years from then, like, we've come so far. Like, now I road trip, and it's so easy. There's a lot more stations out there to utilize that are fast and reliable. Tesla opening up its entire network has been great. So that's been hugely beneficial. And now my road trip, because the frequency of chargers is so much more. I'm only spending 10 minutes, maybe 15 max at
Wow.
a charging stop.
Yeah.
I go, I use the restroom, eat a quick snack, or drink something, and then I'm ready to go. Before there was the infrastructure build out, um, the the experience was different. I'd have to sit there for 45 minutes because you're 200 plus miles from the next charging station. You got to
Yeah.
plan more. Now you don't need to plan as much. And when you get in your gas car, are you planning your gas stops? No, and you don't need to do that anymore with EVs, which is great. But just to dive into that a little bit more, there's 2 types of EV chargers. There's level 2 and level 3. Uh, Level 2 for overnight, and level 3 for quick. And we are an authorized Tesla supercharger
Hmm.
dealer. So we are installing these for Tesla. We're one of their preferred installers, and we've just been doing a whole lot of supercharger business, and the money to be made there. I just spoke about how it's been getting better, and that's driving the adaptation rate as well. So people that have bought EVs in the past are continuing to buy EVs, and that number is just growing as that base grows. So even as the federal incentive, the $7,500 has gone away, people are still buying these, and it's growing quickly. And so owning your own supercharger station, the last proposal I did on Monday was uh, less than 2-year payback, and he was going to make in profit after his added expenses go up and everything. His profit was over $1 million a year.
Whoa.
Just
Oh my
incredible.
gosh.
Yeah, yeah. There's a big
That's
need, and there's
crazy.
really good tools out there to forecast the traffic that a charging station can have. So
Yeah.
um, just really exciting. And then putting everything together, solar, batteries, and EV charging stations. It's kind of like the trifecta, and it becomes a really good option for people.
Yeah. Wow. That's so crazy because I knew a little bit about the battery systems on the residential side, but not the commercial
Yeah,
side. And now adding the whole EV charging, there's a reason they call it a system, just like a roof system. Like there's so many elements that can work together to make it, perform really well. And in this case, help make building owners money too. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Man, wealth of knowledge here. So, um, if people listening aren't sold yet, hopefully they will be by the end. But for those who are potentially looking into adding a solar system or any of these components, what are some things they should be looking for when evaluating, different solar installers, proposals, quotes, etc.? What's your recommendation?
Yeah, a lot to say on this topic. I know I'm pretty verbose.
No, it's
Apologies there,
good.
but
It's
yeah,
good to have the
such
information.
this is such an important question because for so long the solar industry was kind of the Wild West. It was new and full of like quirky dudes and gals that were just trying to like do the right thing. It was so hippy dippy, and it's evolved so much from those early days. Um, you know there's a lot of money to be made in the industry. I'm not shy to say that, but it's got to be done the right way. And then because people have these money signs in their eyes, it is easy, and I see this happen all the time, especially when I was on the manufacturer side, where I got to see a whole lot of different proposals from different companies all across the United States. Some of it was eye opening. So I've got some, things to watch out for, some red flags to take note of. And we've touched on a little bit of on one of the earlier questions, but if you have no basic knowledge of solar, and why would you, right? Like,
Right.
this is a difficult thing to accomplish. Um, Sometimes you have to go with your gut, but there, if you're listening to this, hopefully this could be a decent little guide to help you. But I had a client. I mean, just a quick anecdote here. I had a client the other day tell me that their installer was telling them they had to install a battery per the city requirements. And for this particular city, it was absolutely just a blatant lie. They were just trying to increase
Mm,
their sale. And I see this a lot. These little gimmicky tricks to just get a higher sale. Like, it's just so silly, and it really gives our industry a bad name. And I try to do absolutely everything that I can to avoid this. So ultimately, just spend time with your rep and ask tons of questions. Watch out for over promises. You're never going to have a zero bill with solar. Like, that's a common thing I hear people say, that you're always going to have some sort of fee, or the solar didn't cover your entire bill for 1 month, or whatever. Like, there's always
sure.
some sort of bill. The utility will always get you for something. You don't get paid to go solar. Like, I see ads on YouTube or Instagram or whatever. Like, are you thinking about going solar? Like, there's so many silly things out there that are just like misrepresenting the truth. And so that's definitely what Good Faith Energy does, and what I particularly have taken to heart is like being an energy consultant, telling the client exactly how it is, what incentives are available in their area, how realistic is it going to be that you get it. Some incentives are a lottery. Some incentives are only for certain types of systems or size systems, or once the money is gone, it's gone. But I still see people pitching that incentive is 100% guaranteed to go to them. Like, it's just not right. So watch out for those marketing pitfalls. There's no cost solar. And then, look for the energy model. Do they accurately represent your bill and usage? In the deregulated market here in Texas, like, I have to create a custom rate for every single client. And accuracy matters there, especially at the scale that we can be at for CNI. Um, Utilities are tricky, and sometimes they hide and lump things together. I've seen inexperienced EPCs lump the total bill, like the total cost of the bill, under one flat kilowatt hour rate. And that's just not how you're billed. Like, it's very rare that you ever see that. And what happens on the flip side of that is you'll get a big inflated savings number if they've done that, because A lot of the bill is not going to be reduced from solar. You're not going to lower demand charges that much from a solar system. But if you've lumped everything under the kilowatt hour rate, it's going to look like you are. So make sure you compare what their energy model is to your actual bills. Um, and the next part of this is some solar companies are just marketing and sales companies, and they end up subbing out the job to somebody else once it's sold, and that's just a ripoff. And you don't have any control how the installation really goes. Like when it gets down to the nitty gritty things, like something as simple as wire gauge side. If they're skimping out on the wire gauge, you're going to have lower production than what was promised to you, which means you're less savings, and that ROI is just going to go up.
Mm.
So to avoid that, ask the solar company if they employ their own installation teams or if they sub. Also, ask for some examples of work they've done. For CNI, there's a lot of residential focused installers out there that want to get into CNI and aren't really experienced. And so, that can lead to a very complicated installation. I'm not saying residential EPCs aren't good at or can't do CNI, but just ask for some of their work. See what kind of detail they go into, and if they're more of an open book, I would be more inclined to go with them. If they're kind of standoffish at that question, then maybe it's time to get another bid. But lots of these inexperienced companies, they'll price it wrong, and then and I've seen this done intentionally, is they'll give you a super low price on the front end and then hit you with a ton of change orders through the process. Like, oh, here's the
Mm.
permitting fee, here's this fee. Oh, we didn't know we had to do this, and I didn't know we need mechanical attachments versus ballasted. Like, there's all these
Mm.
things that can happen, and they just hit you with these, and then now you've signed a contract, and it's just gonna be a huge nightmare.
Yeah.
And if they don't know what they're doing, you could be in PTO purgatory, where you get stuck in this loop where you don't pass an inspection, and you have to change something, and they'll come back. And if you didn't do it right, then you got to start all over again. So experience matters. Ask for referrals. That can be an awkward thing to do, but just call somebody that they give you and talk with them. If you're about to spend, CNI projects are expensive on the front end. Incentives make things a lot cheaper on the back end, but that upfront cost is high. So, it's a big investment. Make sure you do your due diligence. Speak to an actual client. With all of that said, things can go wrong. This is construction at the end of the day. Solar is construction. There are unforeseen things that can happen. And in those moments, it's really important to determine, how did that company behave? Were they transparent with the mistake or what happened? Did they offer solutions? Did they own up to the mistake? Those things would change the entirety of the project, and whether or not you want to do a second project with them.
Yeah. Absolutely. Do your homework. Kind of like a roof, right? You want it done right. So ask around, do your homework, compare
Yeah,
bids.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough because that sales process, especially if you're linked up with a very salesman-y consultant, it can be pressure, and you're like, okay, I'll just sign. Like, stop pressuring me. Don't do it.
Right.
Yeah.
You're allowed to take a breath, take a
Hmm.
day, think about it.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, awesome. That was super helpful too.
Yeah.
And there's an aspect that we didn't really talk about. Like, we talked about the savings of a
Mhm.
solar system, but what about clients who are looking, you know, maybe in addition to savings, that brand impact, brand identity of becoming a more sustainable company?
Yeah.
Like, what does that conversation look like with clients?
Yeah, that in the commercial side, that happens so rarely.
Oh,
It's so sad and disheartening, but it does come up, and
yeah.
and there are and I feel like, just 5 years ago, just 3 years ago, it was even hard, like pre-pandemic. This was like way, like, this green marketing was very in vogue and very popular, and much more like all these companies were putting these mandates out to go green, and they had a lot of marketing behind that. And I think some companies are still doing that, and Good Faith Energy has some pretty slick marketing. We do some really cool videos. Our YouTube is pretty neat. Um, and we'll team up with the customer if they want to like collaborate on that, and if they have any requests, we'll add that into the little sizzle reel. Um, or we have other tools that client can extrapolate from what they've done. So, for instance, we had a client that added an iPad in the lobby, which displayed what their current production was on the array. So it just like was 24/7. At nighttime it's showing a big zero, but during the day you get to see exactly how much energy they were creating, which was very cool. You can add things like your the trees that you've seen, the CO2 reduction. There's different ways you can sort of take that offset and apply it to different ways to make yourself look green for whatever you're trying to accomplish, I suppose. Um, Really, the biggest marketing that you can do, though, depending on your business type, but the biggest thing that you can do is a big old solar canopy right in the front of your business. So when you're driving by, you can see the beautiful array over your parking lot, and maybe some DC fast chargers under there. So you're making great revenue from the chargers. You've got great savings and offset from your carport. Sometimes the roof just isn't enough. If you've got a
Yeah.
tall building, what's 100 panels going to do if you're an 20-story building?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah.
Awesome.
Mhm.
So we've talked about a couple different projects and clients throughout this podcast. Is there one that kind of stands out to you of maybe your favorite and kind of what made it successful?
Yeah. Not to get all on, uh, cutesy, but it was my first installation with Good Faith Energy.
Okay.
This was before I even worked with Good Faith. I was selling them hardware from the manufacturer I was with at the time. So this was a project that we donated hardware to. Mo and Michael, the owners of Good Faith, came to me and said, "Hey, we've got this cool project." And they pitched it to me, and I was like, "Wow, yes!" And I took it to the owner of our company, and he was like, "Yeah, this is amazing. Let's donate the inverters and go from there." So this project was uh, just in the outskirts of Dallas, and it's a little farm called Bonton Farms. And they grow really high quality food to serve its community, and
Mm.
it's located in an underserved area, much like we see in a lot of parts of our country where there are serious systemic issues in these low income areas that are overlooked and neglected by society. And Bonton Farms made its whole point to center health and nutrition to this community. So they provide the high quality nutrient dense foods to a community that otherwise like wouldn't have access to those types of food. So and I just stopped by Bontarn a few weeks ago actually and had breakfast. And it was so delicious. If you're in the Dallas area and you want some good food, it's pretty awesome. It's a very cool farm that they have there. And I've got a 5-year-old boy, and he had a kick at going and seeing the farm, and they've got chickens and goats and stuff in the back too. And you can just, he's working out there. You can go take a peek. And so he had a blast. And so Good Faith donated this solar system, which allows this awesome, very important establishment in this area to function with lower operating costs. And it provided a better service for the whole community. And so that's when it clicked for me that Good Faith Energy is a different kind of company. And it really aligned with my personal philosophies and beliefs and how to do right by the customer, your community, and really put what we sell, these vehicles of savings and revenue, um, to good use. And that's what I wanted to be a part of.
That's awesome. That's a great success story.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you're in the Dallas area, for sure go to Bonton Farms. I am going to add that to my list next time I'm in Texas.
Very cool. Yeah.
Um, awesome. Well, we've kind of talked about, previous projects. Now looking ahead, what are some of the trends that you see maybe shaping the future of commercial solar, and how can businesses maybe prepare for that?
Yeah. So the trends that I see, the trends that I see are largely centered around confusion and misinformation, thanks to the utilities. They like to play games, and they'll claim that their rates have never gone up. But what I see what's happening is they'll keep that kilowatt hour rate the same, and that's what their claim is, and that's how they're not lying to you straight up. Um, that the rate hasn't changed is that kilowatt hour rate hasn't changed, but they've added new fees, they've increased the demand charges. They'll bundle these different buckets of charges under different headings, or that they blend things together. It is impossible. Like, you need to go take a college course in how to decipher utility bills, because they're intentionally confusing.
Yeah.
Um, so, the fact of this is, utility rates keep going up. And across the country, the national average over the last decade, energy costs have gone up 33%. So,
Wow.
with that increase in energy, plus all these other increases, I don't know if you've been to the grocery store lately, but it's expensive.
Yeah.
So, how do businesses sustain? And like really, like how
Right.
can you run a business if you're a small business owner and the world is just getting so expensive? What can you control? Well, energy independence is one of the few levers that you can pull as a business owner and take
Mhm.
control of one of those things that is out of control. Um, so yeah, one of the best investments that you can make to shelter yourself is energy independence. And even if your offset isn't that high, anything really helps. And adding batteries to future proof yourself from things like time of use charges or rate changes or higher demand charges or whatever game that the utility is playing. Like, you don't need to be a part of it. Opt out through a big system. Um, and just to elaborate on a time of use charge, as the Texas listeners aren't really, they don't really know what that is yet. So time of use charge is big on the East Coast and the West Coast, and that's a variable rate. So depending on the time of day, the grid is going to be stressed at different levels. So the middle of the night, not stressed, so you're going to
Mhm.
pay less. 4 p.m. hits, when it's the hottest time of day and everybody's getting home from work and turning everything on. You gotta watch Netflix. And you're everything gets way more expensive. In California, it goes from 14 cents per kilowatt hour to 55 cents per kilowatt hour
Wow.
in some places. Like I said, it's out of control.
Yeah.
And Texas is playing with this. They're conditioning people to get used to this idea. Right now, Austin Energy has a volunteer TOU rate. There are other providers that offer, free nights and weekends, like the old cell phone plans. They're just conditioning you for variable rates, and so it's coming. I can't tell you when, but
Yeah.
coming, and so they're gonna get you.
Mhm.
Because what at the end of the day, what's happening in America? We're electrifying. That's EVs, it's data centers, AI. All that stuff is just adding to our grid stress, which is proven time and time and again to be antiquated and needs some serious upgrades. In California, PG&E, after the Palisades fire, the Paradise fire,
Mm.
uh, they were found culpable for the tragedy that happened there. And it goes back to not maintaining the grid, and now they're forced to do those upgrades. But um, who's paying for it? Because they didn't dip into their savings or their margins. No, they're charging the customers for these upgrades. And you better be straight that is going to happen here in Texas when they start upgrading the grid at a faster rate.
Mm.
So solar and battery system will shelter you from that volatility. We don't have to be a hostage to their games.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Sorry, got
Well,
a little heated there.
no, it's
Passionate
important
about
information. Yeah,
yeah.
it's stuff that people should know and, might not always be top of mind for them, right? And if
100%.
you're investing in this, it's important to know what you're investing in long term too. Um, so I saved the best question for last.
Okay.
I'm curious, as a sommelier, what
Yeah.
are some of your go-to wines?
Okay. Okay. Yes. All my most that is in a very important question, and one that I get all the time. People ask me what's good, and like everyone has their own tastes, their
Sure.
own desires, what they look for in a wine. So my biggest piece of advice is when you go to a shop to buy wine, reach out right in front of you or up. If you have to bend over at all to get that bottle, don't buy it. That's my piece of advice. They put the good stuff in the middle and up.
Yep.
Because there is a big difference between low quality wine and mid and up.
Absolutely.
So
it's a good life lesson.
Yeah. Like after that.
Reach high.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Mitch, thank you so much. This was a wealth of knowledge about all things battery, solar, EV, wine, you name it. And we really appreciate your time. All of you listening, you can find more information about Good Faith Energy on AskARoofer.com in their directory, and more information can be found in their show notes. And if you're in the Texas area, please make sure that you reach out to them for your solar needs in the future. Well, Mitch, thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll do it again soon, hopefully.
Sounds great. Have a great one. Bye.
You too.
If your roof needs answers, subscribe now to the Ask a Roofer podcast. We've got your questions covered, one episode at a time. Go to AskARoofer.com to submit your questions and learn more. Stay tuned and keep those questions coming.